They told you to be good, to sit still in school, to raise your hand, to follow rules, to work hard, to obey authority, to not question, to play your part quietly. From the beginning, you were shaped to serve a system, not to understand it. The good citizen isn't a natural identity. It's a manufactured product. And like every product, it was designed, not for your benefit, but for the machine you were born into. Look closer. Good citizens don't revolt. Good citizens pay taxes. Good citizens sacrifice their youth for careers that drain them. Good citizens trust experts, no matter how contradictory. Good citizens consume, comply, and never complain too loudly. And the most obedient among them are praised the most. But what if all of this was by design? A system that rewards your submission will never reward your freedom. The lie is subtle because it doesn't look like chains. It looks like stability, like a mortgage, like career promotions, like doing what's expected. But underneath, you're not free. You're conditioned. You're cooperative because you've been broken into it. This is where the good citizen begins, in childhood indoctrination disguised as virtue. What if the right thing isn't right at all? From your earliest years, you were taught that morality means obedience, that being good is about following rules even when they don't make sense, even when they conflict with your instincts. You weren't taught to think. You were taught to conform. And this morality, this so-called goodness, was never yours to begin with. It was downloaded into you by schools, governments, and media, institutions with their own agendas. They needed you to behave, to be predictable, to believe the lie that obedience equals virtue. But here's the trap. When morality is defined by the system, resistance becomes evil. Question authority? You're difficult. Reject social norms? You're dangerous. Refuse to play the game? You're ungrateful. This isn't morality. It's behavioral control, dressed up as ethics, and it's weaponized. If you ever try to break free, the voices of the hive will whisper, "You're selfish, you're wrong, you're bad." They'll shame you into returning to your place. Because when you wake up, you threaten their sleep. The good citizen is programmed to police others, not just themselves. That's why the most enslaved minds often defend the system the hardest, not out of logic, but out of fear. From childhood, we're trained in one core lesson: obey. The good student doesn't question the teacher. The good employee follows the rules. The good citizen pays their taxes, keeps their mouth shut, and trusts the system, even when the system is obviously failing. But have you ever asked why obedience is so widely celebrated? Is it really about virtue or about control? Jung warned that blind obedience is not maturity but regression, a return to childhood where decisions are outsourced and personal responsibility is avoided. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "A million zeros joined together do not unfortunately add up to one. Ultimately, everything depends on the quality of the individual. A society that overvalues obedience is a society terrified of individuality. The good citizen isn't encouraged to think, but to conform, not to lead, but to follow. And that conformity is rewarded. You get approval, security, even status, but you lose something far more precious: autonomy." Let's look into Marx and manufactured consent. Karl Marx didn't mince words when it came to how power operates in society. He argued that the dominant ideas in any era are the ideas of the ruling class, not because they are true, but because they serve those in control. Obedience, then, isn't just a moral ideal, it's a tool. The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. Karl Marx: "You're trained to see your submission as freedom, to work for someone else's dream 40 hours a week and call it a good life, to consume without questioning, to vote without understanding, to serve without resistance. This isn't freedom. It's what Noam Chomsky would later call manufactured consent, a situation where people believe they're acting freely, when in fact their thoughts and actions have been carefully molded." Let's not forget about the Einstein's warning about education and authority. Even Albert Einstein, scientist, not social critic, saw the dangers of a society built on obedience. He once wrote, The school should always have as its aim that the young man leave it as a harmonious personality, not as a specialist. But today, schools produce obedient specialists, people trained to be cogs in a machine, not thinkers capable of reshaping the machine itself. This isn't accidental, it's by design. Because a society of obedient citizens is easy to manage, easy to manipulate, easy to sell to, easy to rule. Let's be honest and say what the corporate state machinery really is. The average person spends their life serving systems they don't control. You wake up to an alarm you didn't choose, go to a job you don't love, pay taxes for policies you don't support, obey laws written by people you'll never meet, and then you're told you're free. In reality, you've been programmed through media, school, even religion, to conflate obedience with morality. You think that being a good citizen means not rocking the boat, when sometimes the boat needs to be rocked. We've made heroes out of quiet compliance and enemies out of critical voices. But what happens when the system itself becomes immoral? What happens when the obedient become complicit? Well, we can call it the shadow of civilization. Jung's concept of the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, applies not just to individuals but to societies. The good citizen is often someone who has projected their shadow outward. Instead of facing their own inner cowardice, they judge the rebel. Instead of examining their own conformity, they attack the dissenter. It's a form of moral outsourcing. Society feeds on this denial. Governments thrive when citizens are too distracted, too divided, or too docile to question authority. Corporations profit when obedience is dressed up as responsibility, and religions often gain power when obedience is equated with faith. But this kind of obedience has a cost, the death of critical thinking. When you live in constant submission to external authority, you begin to lose touch with your own inner compass. You stop asking, "What do I believe? What is right? What am I here to do?" And instead you ask, "What's allowed? What's expected? What will keep me safe?" This is the inner slavery Jung warned of, a psychological prison far more enduring than any political tyranny. Because when the chains are in your mind, you don't even see them. You mistake them for tradition, or patriotism, or morality. But deep down you feel it, the quiet dread, the sense of something missing, the gnawing awareness that life is passing you by, and you're living someone else's script. This isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. That's why we must understand that obedience is comfortable. Freedom is dangerous. Freedom is terrifying. It requires you to think for yourself, act for yourself, take responsibility for your choices. That's why most people prefer obedience. It's easier to follow than to lead, easier to comply than to risk. As Erich Fromm observed in Escape from Freedom, people often flee from real freedom into authoritarianism, not because they love the tyrant, but because they fear uncertainty. But if we continue to choose comfort over truth, silence over rebellion, obedience over awakening, we're not citizens anymore. We're accessories to our own oppression. By now, you've likely realized that control in modern society doesn't come through chains or violence. It comes through ideas, implanted in your mind so deeply you mistake them for your own. This is the final trick, to get you to police yourself. What is the most dangerous form of control? The philosopher Michel Foucault argued that the most efficient form of power is one that no longer needs to punish people. It teaches them to punish themselves. It doesn't need to lock you up. You've already built the prison in your head. Your thoughts have become a script written by others. Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Don't question the system, it's too big to fight. Real change comes from voting, not resisting. Trust the experts. Trust the media. Trust the rules. But what if these aren't your beliefs? What if they're echoes of something much older, much more calculated? Have you heard of Edward Bernays and the birth of manufactured identity? In the early 20th century, Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, created what we now call public relations. But its true name is psychological manipulation. Bernays realized that if you want people to obey without question, you don't just need to control their actions. You need to control their desires, their fears, their dreams, their identities. He used Freudian psychology to sell everything from cigarettes to war. But more importantly, he proved a chilling idea. If you control how people think, you never need to control what they do, because they'll do it willingly. They'll call it their freedom. They'll defend the very system that keeps them powerless. This is how the good citizen is created, not by violence, but by suggestion, by repetition, by propaganda. This is where Carl Jung's identity as a cage comes to play. Carl Jung believed that when you conform to society's expectations too rigidly, you abandon yourself, the totality of who you are. You become a persona, a mask built to fit in. Every transformation demands as its precondition the ending of a world, the collapse of an old philosophy of life. Carl Jung. But collapse is uncomfortable. Most people would rather remain broken than be reborn. So instead of transforming, they cling to the identity given to them. I'm a proud taxpayer. I'm just doing my job. I'm a good citizen. But what if being a good citizen today means being a silent enabler, a passive cog, a self-silent soul? Then your identity is not just false, it's enslaving you. So please always remember that the mind is the final battlefield. George Orwell once said, "The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history." When you forget your history, your culture, your ancestral strength, your spiritual hunger, you become easy to mold. And that's what's happening now. We live in a world of endless dopamine loops, social media feeds, fake outrage, manufactured enemies, empty slogans. You're told what to care about, what to fear, who to hate, and what side you're on. You're kept in a permanent state of emotional agitation, too distracted to think clearly, too exhausted to rebel. This isn't politics. This is warfare on the subconscious level. Your sense of self is under siege. And if you lose that war, you become not just a good citizen, you become a hollow shell. Here's Einstein's warning. Ethics must guide progress. Albert Einstein once said, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything." Obedience in the face of injustice is not virtue, it's betrayal of your own conscience. But to act ethically, you must first wake up. You must learn to question the narratives you've swallowed, the symbols you worship, the common sense you were spoon-fed. Because the true war is not outside you, it's inside. The battle for your allegiance is happening in your thoughts, your identity, your very definition of what it means to be a good person. And that's the genius of modern control. It convinces you that being good means being silent. So when obedience becomes an addiction, have you ever noticed how deeply people cling to their role in society, even if it's clearly killing them? The man who works a job he hates for 40 years because it's what men do. The woman who suppresses her voice because it's not ladylike to question. The citizen who justifies government overreach because they must know best. This is identity addiction. It's easier to suffer with a label than to live without one. Easier to stay obedient than to face the terrifying possibility that you've been lied to your entire life. And so people double down on obedience. They defend it. They romanticize it. Because without it, who are they? This is why awakening is so hard. It requires a symbolic death, the death of who you thought you were. But without that death, there is no rebirth. So this is the final betrayal, when you police others. The most insidious result of this psychological warfare is that people start turning on each other. The citizen who calls the cops on a protester, the employee who snitches on a co-worker for speaking out, the friend who mocks you for asking questions. They're not defending truth. They're defending their identity, their illusion of safety. They've become unpaid enforcers of the system, loyal slaves who believe they're free. Because once the propaganda is internalized, you don't need guards anymore. You become your own warden. You simply must understand that freedom begins with disobedience. To break this cycle, you don't need violence. You don't need a revolution in the streets. You need a revolution of consciousness. You must reclaim your mind, rebuild your identity, refuse the role you've been assigned. And that means being disobedient, not recklessly, but courageously. Say no when silence is demanded. Ask why when everyone else says yes. Be willing to walk alone rather than kneel with the herd. Because until you do, the good citizen in you will keep winning, and the free human within you will keep dying. So you've seen the cage. You've felt its bars. Now how do you escape? The truth is, freedom isn't something you're given, it's something you take, and the system knows this. That's why it doesn't just punish disobedience, it pathologizes it. The rebel is unstable. The questioner is paranoid. The nonconformist is antisocial. This isn't an accident. It's a defense mechanism, a system terrified of awakening. But you're not here to be afraid. You're here to be free. Here is how. Step 1. Recognize the illusion of choice. Modern society offers you a menu of fake freedoms, which brand to consume, which political puppet to vote for, which pre-approved ideology to parrot. But real freedom, the freedom to say no, to opt out, to create your own path, that's the one choice they never advertise. Karl Marx was right. The oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class are to represent and repress them. Your first act of defiance? Stop mistaking permission for power. Step 2. Reclaim your mind. The war on attention. Your attention is the most valuable commodity in the world, and it's been stolen. Social media addiction, 24/7 news cycles, endless consumerism. These aren't just distractions, they're anesthesia. And Noam Chomsky warned us as well. The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. Your weapon? Delete the apps that addict you. Stop consuming news that only makes you angry, not informed. Read books they don't want you to read. A mind that belongs to itself is the first step toward freedom. Step 3. Reject the good citizen identity. The good citizen is a myth, a pacification tactic. You're told paying taxes is patriotism. You're told blind obedience is morality. You're told silence is wisdom. But history's true heroes were never good citizens. Socrates drank poison rather than stop questioning. Galileo defied the church to proclaim the truth. Step 4. Build parallel systems. The system wants you to believe there is no alternative, but underground economies, decentralized currencies, and independent communities are already rising. Learn skills they can't tax, support networks they can't control, create art they can't censor. Einstein's lesson: we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Step 5. Embrace the discomfort of freedom. Freedom isn't safe. It's terrifying. It means standing alone. It means being misunderstood. It means risking everything. But the alternative? A life of quiet regret. A death of the soul. Remember Erich Fromm's ultimatum. There is no greater tragedy than to give up on oneself. This is your final warning. The clock is ticking. Every system in history has collapsed, including this one. The question is, will you be a prisoner when it falls? Or will you already be free? This isn't just about politics. It's about the meaning of your existence. The good citizen dies with the system that created them. The free human outlives empires. Now what will you choose? Let me help you. I have next steps for you. Share this with someone who's still asleep. Take one act of defiance today. Cancel a subscription, question a norm. Create something uncensored. Decide, will you obey or will you live? If this resonated with you, if you felt that itch of recognition, don't let it end here. Like this video if you're ready to see beyond the illusion. Share it with someone who needs to wake up. And most importantly, keep questioning. The system fears nothing more than people who remember how to think. Thanks for listening. Now go, be disobedient.